Good morning, church. First of all, I want to say thank you to Pastor John and Pastor Deb for asking me to come and speak to you this morning and for trusting me to come up. And secondly, I want to assure you that I won't take long. God really has got a sense of humour, and today is one of those days where I'm acutely aware of that. Almost 20 years ago, I was reliably informed by somebody who knew Chris extremely well, who's no longer with us, that I should never try and compete against Chris's first love, the true love of his life. I was reminded of it on our wedding day, just a few years later, and at the altar, Chris had got a radio in his suit pocket, and he got one of the ushers to give him real-time information because there was a football match on the day of our wedding. And today, well, he did check if I was speaking this morning the same day as Wolves are playing the Albion. And Chris said no more. He left that one in the background. All went quiet. And then the day that the tickets went on sale, I got that noted in my memory. And he called me late that morning. He said, I just need to let you know, I haven't got a ticket for the Wolves match, so I will be there that morning to hear you. God bless you, Chris. When John asked me to speak this morning, I answered him the same way as I do every time he asks me to do anything, and it's always yes, no problem. And I really thought I knew for this morning what I was meant to speak about, what I was meant to bring to you. And I've always felt that it's my role when I do come up here to encourage you. I thought I knew that I was meant to be speaking to you today about the power of amen and its meaning, so be it. And then a few weeks ago, on a Monday evening, I really felt I'd got it wrong. And I felt like God was giving me something else to bring. And then John, the following week, brought his story to us, didn't he? And then the week after that, Deb brought hers. And I felt like I was meant to bring part of my story to you too. And then Emily got up here. Wasn't it wonderful to see Emily come up here? Emily, I want to encourage, I know she's upstairs, but I really want to encourage her. It was so good what she brought to us last week. It's incredibly nervous to come up here and face you all, even though you're all smiling and you're all lovely people. It's nerve-wracking. And I think what she brought to us last week was just wonderful. Yeah. And she spoke from Luke 2, and that's where I want to start today. So for those of you who weren't here last week, these are the verses that she spoke from. And it says this: every year, Jesus' parents went to Jerusalem for the festival of the Passover. When he was 12 years old, they went up to the festival according to the custom. After the festival was over, while his parents were returning home, the boy Jesus stayed behind in Jerusalem, but they were unaware of it. Thinking he was in their company, they travelled on for a day. Then they began looking for him among their relatives and their friends. When they did not find him, they went back to Jerusalem to find him. After 3 days, they found him in After 3 days, they found him in the temple courts, sitting among the teachers, listening to them and asking them questions. Everyone who heard him was amazed at his understanding and his answers. When his parents saw him, they were astonished. His mother said to him, "Son, why have you treated us like this? Your father and I have been anxiously searching for you." "Why were you searching for me?" he asked. "Didn't you know I had to be in my father's house?" But they did not understand what he was saying to them. Then he went down to Nazareth with them and was obedient to them, but his mother treasured all these things in her heart. And Jesus grew in wisdom and stature and in favour with God and man. Now, when I was sat in the congregation last week and Emily read this passage, I knew that I was speaking from that as well this morning. But can I tell you, the first thing that struck me in this whole thing, as a mom to an almost 12-year-old male, how on earth did Mary and Joseph manage to carry on travelling home for a whole day without their son and not know it? I can promise you that if I am travelling for more than 5 minutes with either one of my little gremlins, I'm getting a question from them. It's either going to be, how much longer is this journey going to take? When can I next eat? It is, isn't it? And a third one will always be some sort of random question like, I don't know, how far can a bus tilt to before it topples over? The randomness of the questions that I receive as a mum, I'm told. We would never have left our children because I can promise you they wouldn't have let us get more than 5 minutes away and I would have had to go and reclaim our potential lost property. But there's the Son of God left. So when Emily read that passage to me, it really confirmed to me this morning that I was meant to be speaking to about the same thing. And right at the end of that passage, his parents eventually find him, don't they? And that's 3 days later in the temple courts. They find him asking questions. And it goes on to say that the teachers were amazed. And then it says his parents ask him what he's doing there, and his reply to them is another question, followed by another question. These earliest spoken words of Jesus affirm to us because they're questions that he asked, and they show us part of the most important part of his identity, that he wanted to be close to his Father God. It was natural for him to be there. So much so that he actually asked and questioned his parents, why are you asking? Surely you should have known and just come straight here. He wanted to be with his Father. Questions are great. I love them. And there's power in them. Jesus knew this. It tells us that he started asking them from a young boy. They had so much power and they were so notable that Luke records them being asked. And he notes that all were amazed by them. Now, I can remember before box sets were a thing on Netflix and Amazon Prime, there was a box set of CDs that were about called Faith Comes by Hearing. It was a box set. It was an audio Bible, for anybody who can remember them. And it was called Faith Comes by Hearing because it was taken from the scripture. Faith comes from hearing the message, and the message is heard through the word about Christ. And right at the start this morning, I want to agree with that for the record. Faith rises up in me when I hear the word of God. But I just want to add to that too. Faith can rise from the questions that we ask. Faith can rise from asking the right questions at the right time. I am so inquisitive. My parents knew that on a whole other level. So much so that I'd ask why that many questions. My dad would give the dad answer to the question why, which was Z. But we got used to it. And Dad will always recount to whoever will listen to him about my second parents' evening. So back then, teacher had this massive desk, and the parents would have the smallest chairs possible. And we still do now. We go to parents' evening and we're sitting almost on the floor, and the teacher is behind their desk telling us how the kids have got on. This teacher, I don't think she liked me much. And she said to my mum and dad, Emma asks far too many questions. Emma needs to know there are 25 other children in this classroom, but she always wants to know more. And I'll finish off this story part by telling you that the recollections of what happened after this point vary ever so slightly between my parents. But my dad gave his answer to the teacher and my mum was kicking him. The teacher couldn't see because she was behind her great big desk, but my mum was kicking my dad to tell him to shut up. What he was saying was not helpful, which only served to make matters worse. And he said to my mum, in front of the teacher, "You can keep kicking me, but I am going to speak to the teacher about this." Dad wanted to make sure that I was being punished for being curious. I always wanted to know just that little bit more. And maybe he was right. So that's why today I want to speak to you about questions, because questions can help clarify. Questions can help initiate conversations. They can help to realign us, and they can really help to refocus us too. Questions are really good. Now, I'm not standing up here and questioning who God is. I'm not questioning God. But what my questions are for is for a deeper rooted understanding, a deeper rooted faith. Because there's power in asking questions. Jesus knew it. The disciples knew it. Those who opposed Jesus, they knew it too. They tried asking him the questions. And you know what? Quite often, Jesus replied with another question. I love that. Jesus knew the power of a question. The right question will lead to greater understanding. I've also put that the right question reveals true intent. And the right question bears the heart of the one who's asking it. I love statistics, and it says that Jesus asked over 300 questions in the Gospels. And what's even more interesting to me is that this is almost double the amount of questions is recorded as him being asked. So Jesus is recorded as asking twice the amount of questions than he was asked. He knew that power in asking the right question to the right person. I also want to mention here that there's plenty of times that it's recorded that the questions that were asked revealed the true intent and the heart of the one asking them. And they were asked sometimes from a position by that person that they knew better. They were better educated, felt they were in a higher position, and that they knew better on the subject. And Luke chapter 6 speaks about this. It says, one Sabbath, Jesus was going through the grain fields, and his disciples began to pick some heads of grain, rub them in their hands, and eat the kernels. Some of the Pharisees asked, "Why are you doing what is unlawful on the Sabbath?" And Jesus answered them, "Have you never read what David did when he and his companions were hungry? He entered the house of God, and taking the consecrated bread, he ate what was lawful only for priests to eat. And he also gave some to his companions. Then Jesus said to them, the Son of Man is the Lord of the Sabbath." On another Sabbath, he went to the synagogue and was teaching, and a man was there whose right hand was shriveled. The Pharisees and the teachers of the law were looking for a reason to accuse Jesus, so they watched closely to see if he would heal on the Sabbath. But Jesus knew what they were thinking and said to the man with the shriveled hand, "Get up and stand in front of everyone." So he got up and stood there. Then Jesus said to them, "I ask you, which is lawful on the Sabbath, to do good or to do evil, to save life or to destroy it?" He looked around at them all and then said to the man, "Stretch out your hand." He did so, and his hand was completely restored. But the Pharisees and the teachers of the law were furious and began to discuss with one another what they might do to Jesus. Look at the Pharisees there, their questions to Jesus. "Why are you eating and drinking with tax collectors and sinners? What are you doing that's unlawful on the Sabbath?" Jesus knew what they were thinking. Their questions revealed their intent. They were looking for a reason to accuse him, weren't they? They weren't asking from a place of wanting that deeper understanding. They were asking from a place where they think they knew. They thought they knew what they needed to know already. Your right questions reveal your heart, your intent. And I want to reflect just for a couple of minutes on last year, if that's all right. Last year taught me so much, and some of it I really wish I could have learned quicker, and I wish I could have learned it a little bit easier too. You see, when we went into 2023, at the beginning of that year, our greatest desire was for Will to get into his chosen school. He got his heart set on this school. And January and February came and went. I think there was about 723 days in both months. They went on and on and on. And we were waiting for the 1st of March to come. That was the day that we would find out whether Will had got into this school that he so desperately wanted to be in. And that day dragged too. They couldn't have given us the answer at 9 o'clock in the morning. We'd got to wait till well into the afternoon. And we found out that Will had been unsuccessful in getting into this school. Who knew? The year we had Will was a baby boom year, which meant there were way too many people trying to get into this school. And so, as a result, the catchment area shrunk. Giving him that news wasn't easy. But that night, when we told him, we made a promise. And I said, I will keep on trying. Now, I didn't know the admissions process for schools or anything else that goes along with all that shebang, but I wanted to learn really, really quickly. So that following week and the following weeks, I would call certain departments, and each time I phoned, I got a different person that I spoke to. And the answers to these questions that I was asking became so varied that at one night I came home from work and I said to Chris, I promise you, these people who are answering the phone, I don't think even work in the department. I think these people are just walking past a phone that's ringing and just think, I'll answer that call and have a little chat to me. You see, I was asking the wrong question to the wrong person. I was completely in the dark. And it caused me to consider that promise that I'd made to Will, that I would not give up trying. So you know what? I prayed. And I told God how I felt and what I saw that was going on around me. Not that he doesn't know, but it's good to acknowledge what you see going on around you, isn't it? And I asked God a question. I said, would you help me, but would you show me what I'm to do? There were people around me that knew what was going on, and they were so supportive to us. And then there were people that I knew that God was telling me to go and share that situation with and ask them, would they pray with us? Would they pray into this situation? And you know what? God heard. He heard the question, and he gave me the right person to ask that question to. And you know what? There's power and there's breakthrough when you ask the right person the right question. So instead of speaking to randomers every week, what I would do is twice a week, myself and then Chris, we would ring the same person and we'd ask them the exact same question. And this question went on after Wood had left primary school. We'd celebrated him leaving that. Induction days had been and gone at secondary school. Uniforms were bought, but we didn't buy that child a uniform. I carried on, and Chris carried on asking the same person the same question. And then we got the call. That child had got a place. And it wasn't just anybody who called and spoke to Chris. It was that right person. They had the right answer. They called. And then the next day, I felt I should ring that person and say thank you. So I rang them and I said, I've never met you. I'm never going to meet you probably. But I want to thank you. I want to tell you just how grateful I am and how much this means to our family. I also apologised for the multiple calls that they'd had. Oh, I bet they looked forward to a Monday and a Thursday, didn't they, Chris? And you know what this person said back to me? She said, very few times have I ever felt like this, but I knew how much it meant, and I'm so glad that we saw that process through. That person didn't know me. They didn't know my husband. They didn't know my child William. They got no knowledge of who we were, our background, anything, but they understood that question. And they were the right person in the right place to give an answer. And I reflected back on this a few times afterwards to a couple of people, and I said it wasn't their battle, but they understood the battle. And because they understood it, I didn't feel like I was battling anymore. I'd given it to God. I'd asked God the question, and He'd given us the person that could unlock the answer. Anyway, back to Luke. This time, Luke 9, verse 18. Jesus isn't a young boy anymore. He's a man. He's got disciples. Baptised, tempted, he's healed people, raised a young man from the dead, calmed a storm, fed 5,000. He's been busy. And Peter declares that Jesus is the Messiah. Once, when Jesus was praying in private and his disciples were with him, he asked them, "Who do the crowds say I am?" And they replied, "Some say John the Baptist, others say Elijah, and still others that one of the prophets of long ago has come back to life." "But what about you?" he asked. "Who do you say I am?" And Peter answered, "God's Messiah." Jesus strictly warned them not to tell this to anyone, and he said, "The Son of Man must suffer many things and be rejected by the elders, the chief priests, and the teachers of the law, and he must be killed, and on the third day be raised to life." Then he said to them all, "Whoever wants to be my disciple must deny themselves and take up their cross daily. Follow me. For whoever wants to save their life will lose it, but whoever loses their life for me will save it. What good is it for someone to gain the whole world and yet lose or forfeit their very self?" There's a couple of things that I want to mention here. Don't worry, Chris, I'm nearly done. Jesus asks the broad question first. He wants to know what the crowds thought. He wasn't asking this for reassurance. He wasn't asking it out of vanity or for a bit of ego stroking. He wanted to engage with his disciples. He draws them into conversation. He wants to know what the others thought of him. And then he asks the but question. But who do you say I am? Because he wants that personal response, that personal level conversation. And it leads him to asking this right question at the right time. And Peter gives him his answer. Peter responds with who he knows Jesus to be, the Messiah. So after engaging on a wider level and then on a personal level, Jesus is able to share more of what's about to come. Jesus asks that question because he wants to engage and encourage the thinking. And then he wants to teach through the opening up of that conversation, doesn't he? He asks the right people the right question. And so today, I want to encourage you all to do the same. To care about finding the right questions, not just the right answers. I'll say that again. Care about finding the right questions, not just the right answers. Questions to God, questions to those you meet, and questions to those you care about and love. You see, we felt completely overwhelmed at times last year. But when I went to God and asked him that question, would you show me who to go to? Told him that I needed directing where to go and who I needed to ask that question to. And can I also encourage you today? Go and ask questions to other people. You know what? There's so many quick fixes, isn't there? We live in a society where we're almost fed on quick information. You don't read a newspaper anymore. You can scroll through the headlines on your phone. The short clips on Facebook, on Instagram, and all these other social media sites. There's abridged versions to absolutely everything. There's even, I found out in the last couple of weeks, the ability to speed read. You can alter how fast an audiobook is read to you. Had no idea, but you can train to listen to something even quicker. But take time instead to ask questions. Jesus knew the power of asking the right question. And when he asked the disciples if he knew who the crowd thought he was, because he then went on to say, but who do you say I am? He drew them into conversation. I read a quote and it says this: most people don't listen with the intent to understand. They listen with the intent to reply. And I've been in conversations like that. I don't know about the rest of you, but I've sat in conversations and somebody's asked me a question, but I can tell all they really want to do is go on to the next thing and give their response to the question that they've asked. Most people don't listen with the intent to understand. They listen with the intent to reply. But you know, asking a question and wanting to hear and listen and understand that other person's reply makes them feel valued. It makes you feel worthy, doesn't it, of that person's time, of giving that response. It makes them feel like their reply has value. And Jesus did that, didn't he? He led, he loved, and he revealed himself throughout, giving us examples of this. And this year, I want to get better at that too. So, as I finish, same way as I do every time I get up here, I really want to encourage you. Go to God with your questions. Ask him to deepen your faith through them. And if you're in a situation now where you can't see what the answer's meant to be, you might feel completely overwhelmed, you might feel in the middle of a situation, and you're not sure how things are going to work out, ask God to direct you to the right people, equipped with the right questions to ask them. And finally, ask the questions to those around you. It shows that you really care. And it makes them feel valued. It makes them feel loved and of worth. Because God can handle your questions. He can also direct your questions. And he can use them. He can use your questions to show his love through them in your everyday. God bless you.